All right, welcome back everyone to Fighting Words. Today we have the one, the only Skye Hilton. She's the director at Davin Rich Sword School in Midland, Texas. Skye has been on such shows as Knife or Death, and she's originally out of California, and then she finally imported over here to the true South. So, Skye, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right. Skye, as you know, Fighting Words is based off of competitions, and before the pandemic hit and took away a lot of our competitions, you had a very unique one that we're wanting to talk about, but we're also wanting to talk about the one that unfortunately got canceled this year. So, if you're ready to rock, we are too.
I'm ready to rock and roll.
All right. So tell us about Heartbreaker and Texcalibur.
Okay, so let's just start with Texcalibur. Everybody's very much familiar with the bigger sword events like SoCal Sword Fight, Sword Squatch, Long Point, yada yada yada. Well, I've really been inspired by those kind of events because not so much of the competition is great, of course, because you have a lot of people that come from all over the world to compete. You get to meet new people, fight new people. You also get a lot of classes, and it's just a really great community experience. So I wanted to have something like that for the Southern United States. So even though I had it billed as Midland's event, Texcalibur, I wanted it to be something that would be a shuffle event, the Southern Historical Fencing League event, something that we can have as our big international event. Wasn't really planning on it being that big the first year. It was sort of just, kind of cutting our teeth on it. But I wanted it to be something that could grow into the event at Texas. I know we have Purple Heart, but that's kind of attached to, Purple Heart. And we have Bro, which is a really awesome event. Again, that's kind of attached to the Baton Rouge School. Same thing with Symbrogy. So I wanted kind of an independent event that we could all come in on and all claim, this is ours. Everybody in the South, this is our event that we're going to do internationally for everybody.
So what did you do different as opposed to Bro or Gesselfechten or any of these other events that you've mentioned to make it more shuffles and less yours?
Well, I wanted to get everybody in as much as I could. So on this particular event, Texcalibur, in my planning, I had focused a lot on classes. So I tapped my resources and I tried to pull as many instructors as I could from all over. I could. I had Stephen Fick coming in from California, who is my mentor and runs the Davin Rich School there in Santa Clara. I had people coming in from Tucson, New Mexico, Louisiana. I tried to get as many people involved with this as I could. And of course, the great people in Symbrogy and Jeremy, they were all going to help with the rules because we were using Symbrogy's rule set for that. So I had a lot of volunteer work. And I wanted to make it a community, the first one, by trying to get as many people involved with it as possible, with not just with judging or doing marshaling or anything like that, but also in a community aspect with the classes and things like that.
Yeah, because a lot of times events can just feel like you're basically doing a tournament at Bro, you're doing it for Baton Rouge Open. Having a nice mixed event was going to be a very unique thing to go to, where we had people from all walks of life, kind of like what Purple Heart Open usually was, but then again, Purple Heart Open is associated more with the Purple Heart brand. So
yeah. So
now,
whereas
for anybody watching kind of outside of region, that of course Texcalibur did not happen this year despite the planning. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Well, Corona happened, and I don't mean post-Corona, womp womp. I mean the virus of obviously the pandemic. We had it scheduled for the last weekend of March. We had 3-day event. We had been scheduling for months. I had 12 instructors lined up. We had several events. We had a 24-hour assassination challenge, which was going to be anybody could participate in that. You didn't have to be in the tournament. You didn't need a special equipment. It was a 24-hour assassination challenge. We had dinner set up. We had the whole thing where everybody had a chance to participate in something, be it a tournament or the 24-hour challenge or classes or whatever, or just open sparring. And up to 2 weeks, beginning of March, we started seeing pandemic response, events closing, everything. I started to get pressure locally from people. It's like, are you still going to do it? I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. We're going to make everything stay safe. We're going to make everything safe. Everything's going to be good. And up to 2 weeks before then, the venue I had booked closed down because of the pandemic, because it was a city run. We were having it at a community center. So everything was shut down. So whether I wanted to try to take safety precautions or not, it was no longer in my hands. So I tried to kind of keep it alive, thinking, the optimistic, we'll wait 2 months and we'll all quarantine and everything will go back to normal. It'll be great. Well, that didn't happen. So I have postponed it. It's going to be much smaller. It's going to be next year. And we're going to have it at our local Celtic Festival, which is held at a big horseshoe arena. It's the Horseshoe Arena here in Midland. It's a large indoor venue. We have a large space. The Sword School has been performing there and doing classes and fights for the last 2 years. We have a very large space available to us. And the organizer has agreed and thinks it's an awesome idea for us to have Texcalibur there next year, which will drastically cut down cost, not just for us, but also for all the participants as well. So we won't have to pay, quite a bit out of pocket for a venue because we're already going to have the venue over the weekend. And the Celtic Fair has been really, really helpful. And the people who are sponsoring it are really, really excited that we're going to have a HEMA tournament there and classes. I don't expect it to be as big as what I had planned, but I kind of look at it as like this is a good kind of first step, putting tippy toes into the pond before we can, expand it a little bit more.
So go ahead.
Oh, getting on the subject of the youth tournament, I
Actually,
will.
Go ahead. I want to
Yeah.
interrupt for just a second because I'm fascinated by this idea of combining a HEMA tournament with a kind of a wider appeal event like a Celtic Fair, I guess I'm sorry if that's the word for it.
It is. It's the Celtic.
The Celtic Fair. That seems really interesting to me. Can you talk a little bit about what you and the people who are running the Celtic Fair kind of expect to be different both for the fair and for the tournament with combining the two?
We'll have spectators. We will have spectators there who have no idea about any kind of historical fencing or martial arts or anything, because I'm sure you guys have experienced whenever you get out to the layman, just public people. Probably first thing you hear is like, well, I didn't even know Europeans had martial arts, which then you're like, well, martial, actually, if you break it down, that's what you turn to actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah, actually. So this will give locally, this will give us a chance to really expand the knowledge that the school is here. We'll have an actual, we'll have people watching us. We'll have people cheering. So it'll bring something very different to a lot of tournaments, is that other than just having, friends and family and school members there watching you, you're going to have an audience of strangers watching you. So I'm interested to see how the performance level is going to change on that, and how it's going to excite people and maybe make them be a little more showboaty, or instead of trying to go in for that really fast 1 point, they're going to be like, people are watching me. I think I'm going to show off a little bit of skill. Or they may just be tunnel vision, kill zone and not change anything. But I think it'll be an interesting thing to bring to the tournament scene, to have an actual audience of people who are coming and going of all walks of life to come and watch you compete.
Now, you've partnered with groups like the Celtic Fair before, done performances and demonstrations and things like that. Do you feel like that's been a beneficial collaboration in Midlands, and how so?
Absolutely. I'm in a very unique position here in Midland because Midland is so isolated from everything else. We're about 5 hours from Dallas-Fort Worth. We're about 4 hours from El Paso. We're 6 hours from Oklahoma City. We're pretty much
slow to middle schoolers down there.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
yeah. So it was, we're really isolated, and we're in the middle of the Permian Basin, we're surrounded by oil fields. There's not really a whole lot to do, but there's a lot of people who come here to work. So I kind of have a captive audience of people who are not only eager to find stuff to do, but a lot of them have interest in this kind of thing, in learning weapons and learning martial arts, or just fighting with a sword. So them realizing that, hey, I can actually learn this. This is a legitimate martial art. I can take this and go and compete all over the world with it, is mind-blowing for people. It was mind-blowing for me when I first found out about it back in 2013. I was like, this is real? Yeah. I've been lied to my whole life. So it's really eye-opening for people to realize that this is something that they could do, and it's really eye-opening for kids because for when you're a kid, everything's a sword, and then when you find out that you take classes and learn to fight with a sword, you're just like So
Yeah.
it's just an awesome thing.
So
I like sword.
using that as a segue, tell us about Heartbreaker.
I started kids class last year in 2019, the last quarter, and it was really successful. I ended up having to expand it to 2 times a week. I know that sounds weird, but when you're just doing stuff in the middle of the day, you might get 1 or 2 kids, but I was getting, like 7 or 8 kids a class in the middle of the day during school time, because we have all these homeschool kids here. And it was just really popular, and it hit the homeschool community really hard. So the kids showed up. They were really into it. The parents were really into it. And something that the kids want to do, they kept asking me, they're going, when do I get to fight? When do I get to fight? And I'm like, that's a real good question. When do you get to fight? So that's when I got a hold of Jonathan. And he also was studying with a group of kids that were around junior high level.
Middle school kids.
Yeah, middle school kids. I'm old. Middle school kids. And so we got things together, and we decided in February, a little after Valentine's Day, that we were going to have the Heartbreaker tournament. And usually I have a King of Hearts tournament, a little in-house one I call King of Hearts, on Valentine's Day weekend. But since we missed that because the SoCal Sword Fight was on that weekend, we had too many people out. I decided my heart was broken, so we called it the Heartbreaker tournament. And that was a youth tournament. And we had, about 14 kids? 16 kids, something like that, Jonathan?
More than I expected, for sure.
Yeah, it was crowded. And so we had quite a few kids show up. Jonathan brought his group all the way down from Oklahoma City, and we had it at a small karate school. So we used synthetic swords. We ended up using my Rawlings synthetic swords just because that's what my kids have been training with. And you were using the regular, really thick beater one. So since it was my tournament, I'm like, let's just use the Rawling ones because they're a little lighter. And that I was really concerned about safety because, spoiler alert, yeah, they don't make gambesons for tiny people. So most of our kids had to use lacrosse gloves, thick jackets, or motocross gear. And so they had fencing hats. But it went really well. We used some Brogy rules. So we had a number of fights, single combat bouts. We went through. All the kids were really good natured. We didn't have any fits. Everything was good. No injuries. And everybody got little certificate awards at the end. And it was really good. Everybody had a really good time. The kids got a lot out of it. I felt the parents enjoyed it. After Jonathan and you guys had to leave early, we actually hung out and did a little improv grown-up tournament, cat thing there. Improv little grown-up tournament, and the parents hung out for that and just watched us do a King of the Hill type thing. And so
nice.
Yeah, so we did a King of the Hill thing. We got the idea for that from Phoenix Society, where it's whoever wins the most King of the Hill bouts in a set amount of time is announced the winner, and that's how we did play. So we did that, and one of the girls who made it to the semifinals actually took 3rd place in the little King of the Hill tournament.
That's awesome. Really cool.
Yeah. So that's what we did with that. But the kids loved it. The parents loved it. And what it does is it just gets kids ready. It opens their minds because it's not just the sword fighting. It's history. It's culture. It's a lot of stuff. It's fantasy too. Because Jonathan, you teach kids, and the first thing they do is get the sword, and they're like, what would happen if I do this? What would happen if I do this? Yeah. So it's just really fun teaching kids because they come up with all these off the wall questions, and you have all these really long, complicated answers of why it wouldn't work.
Right. Before the tournament, one of the things I lamented was I was teaching a homeschool group, and they were like ages 6, 7, 8, 9. And we had like 8 or 10 kids there, and unfortunately we couldn't get any of them to go because
Rafe went.
Oh yeah, Rafe went. So the fact that y'all were able to put on a tournament that was for youth, and no one got injured, no one threw a fit, and everyone walked away with, we used to call it the 3 S's: smiling, sweating, and sore. Is an achievement. Yeah, so
Well, and before we get too deep into the weeds of working with kids and how that specific is, I'd like to talk just a couple more things about your tournament philosophy in general. You've mentioned a couple of times now that you use Simbrogi's rule set, which Kyle and I, of course, train and teach with the Simbrogi School of Western Martial Arts here in Oklahoma City. So we're very flattered by this. I'd love to get you on the record talking about why that decision was made. I mean, obviously, rule sets are one of the biggest debated topics in HEMA. When we talk about competitive HEMA, the thing everybody gripes about and groans about and cusses about on the way home is the rule set, because everybody's different. Except I took my kiddos to Midland and we fought under the exact same rule set that I train under. So tell me about why.
Simbrogi rule set is simple. It's single bouts. They record them. They keep track of your wins. You don't get caught up with like 4 points, 2 points, 3 points, maybe half a point. You don't get target fixation where people are just worried about getting that deep cut and they end up getting tunnel vision and they get hit in the hand and it's all over, you know. So I like it from not only a competitor's point of view where it's just really simple. All you have to do is strike the guy. That's all you got to do. Just don't get hit, hit them. Sounds simple, you know, but it kind of helps you not get that target fixation where you just turn into like a one shot, just hit them in the head. And also from a judging point of view, it's really simple. You just have to make sure that, you know, for one, you're actively watching. When you see your person you're watching make a strike, or they get a strike, you done, do the thing, and that's it. It's either up or down. It's either you saw it or you didn't see it. There's no, well, it kind of grazed here. Maybe it hit up here. Maybe there's none of that. It's just super simple. They hit them or they didn't hit them. And it makes the tournament flow very easily, very smoothly, and most importantly, very quickly.
Yeah, I cannot describe the amount of rage I had where somebody walks over and they're checking the seam of my jacket to see where, like, did he hit here? That's 5 points. Here's 3 points. And I'm over here going, he hit me. Can we please move on? This is so frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been at different tournaments with some very arcane rule sets, and it definitely gets frustrating because they'll have bonuses and subtractions for, like, is it a controlled strike? Is it a controlled thrust? Did you have control of the weapon? Did you have control of the person? Did this and that? And you're like, I stabbed him in the face. I didn't get hit. Give me the point.
I feel like don't die is kind of the goal, yeah.
And since we're kind of complaining, one thing I do like about Simbrogi is they do not have the minimum, the 70-degree arc, which I fought under that rule set, and I've sworn I'm never fighting under it again because I have waffled a person, and it was called insufficient. Yeah. Because I did pop, I didn't do wham. That was a loud wham in my mic, and I apologize for that. But it's even louder when you get whammed in your helmet. But I learned I'm not the strongest person. I can't rely on my speed and strength in a fight as much as some others. I'm not going to have to do that big of an arc. And a lot of people are in that same boat. So to me, you can't really put umbrella rules and expect everyone physically to fight the same way.
Right.
And now I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit with this. I mean, it's a rule set we happen to like, but I didn't write it. I just fought under it for the last few years. I want to hear a complaint about the Simbrogi rule set. Like, you adopted it, obviously you like it. I'm not trying to like get some kind of a gotcha, but what would you tweak if you had, you know, the red ink pen and you could change something about the Simbrogi rule set after having worked with it at Heartbreaker? What would that be?
I'm really particular about quality of strikes and the martial, I guess how martially sound some strikes would be. So obviously everybody kind of agrees, you know, flats don't count. Hitting and buttering doesn't count. We get into the range of tippy tap strikes. That's where it turns into, would that incapacitate your opponent? Should that be counted as a legitimate strike for a point? And that gets into tippy taps to the knuckle, which hand strikes are viable. As much as nobody likes getting hit in the hands, if you get your fingers cut off, you're not fighting anymore. I don't care who you are. You're going to you're done. But there are tippy tap strikes. And I think a lot of that has to do with just working with the judges and having the judges practice and actively watch and really understand what constitutes a good strike. I haven't really run into too many problems with that at Simbrogi. The only times I did is when the judges would be younger guys who just didn't have the experience, or they're nervous, or they get tired. That's a big thing with judging. Your eyes and brain start to get tired. You guys do a really good job of cycling judges to help prevent that, which I think is really good. And a lot of places do that. But I think quality of hits and people training to strike with a quality hit is important. So that's really my only beef, and I don't even think that really goes with your question. I think that's just kind of tournaments in general.
Yeah, no,
Are people lightsabering and expecting, getting judged as a hit, or they expect it to count? And this is a slice device. It's not a lightsaber. You have to have a good martial strike, I feel, for it to count as a point. So.
Yeah, because I got complaints because as I was center repping, like somebody would swoop underneath and do kind of that little Italian strike, but it was literally like, and that was it. It's like, I mean, that would hurt, but that's probably not incapacitating, as there was not really much snap or anything. But yeah, and I think that's when we're talking about this rule set, how simple it is that people start to just do the quickest, simplest thing they can, which a lot of times is the hand strike, but then it turns into, like, sometimes you can get a fade back cutter who just is going to step off line and just try to touch you and then get out as fast as he can, because what the rule set punishes highly is that you could lose points whenever you double.
Right.
And so it takes away, I will forever be known as the guy who does not like Nordic rules, because the rules allow me to eat a strike and then give one back and still come out higher on the points, depending on where you go. So
yeah.
I like, though, that what you're describing is this tension, because you started with talking about how, hey, it's simple. If you hit, you hit. We're not talking about degrees. We're not talking about where you hit or anything like that. And then when I asked for a critique, you said, well, we need to talk about quality of hits. I like that there's a tension there. I like that this is the core idea that we're trying to find a middle ground in when we're talking about tournament rules. And I think, to be perfectly fair, I think everybody who writes tournament rules is trying to find that balance.
Yeah.
I like that we're zeroing in on it. That's really cool. So that was, I'm glad you answered it that way. That was interesting.
And for those at home that don't know what a waffle is, that's when you hit somebody hard enough that their mask hits their face and leaves an indentation or cut. So the idea of doing that with a snap cut is impressive if you didn't know that. So.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and transition us a little bit. We've talked around the idea of the youth tournament a little, well, kind of directly at it, but also around the idea of training youth fighters here for a bit, which is why I was so excited to have Skye on the podcast really early in our life, because I'm a middle school teacher. That's how I pay the mortgage. And so I'm a little bit biased. I really like that age group and working with them and teaching them and training them. And it's been really fun. I had the honor, as we've talked about a little bit, of teaching an official school HEMA class last year when I was working at a charter school up here in Oklahoma City, and I had a team of about 7 or 8 middle schoolers that were an official school HEMA team, and I'm just so excited about that. I've changed jobs and I'm trying to get it started up with the new one, but we'll get to that in a bit. Kyle has had experience working with homeschool classes here locally in Oklahoma City, so he's kind of similar there. And then one of the most notable things, if you follow Skye on social media, is all the training she does with students. So we're going to talk about that kind of significantly. We already talked about why you decided to include a youth tournament, but I would like to talk about what makes tournaments and training and things like that different when we're working with youth. HEMA is completely populated by middle-aged white guys, almost exclusively. Yes, we're looking at, okay.
I'm middle-aged, God.
Okay, but we're working on bringing some kids into this, and I think Skye's doing better work than anybody I know in that field. So I really want to hear what you have to say about what that looks like. So let's talk first about the tournaments. When you're working on your planning and your rules and your prep, what looked different getting ready for Heartbreaker with a youth tournament, knowing you had your students and my students coming in from out of town and things like that, as opposed to the prep you were doing for Texcalibur and a more traditional adult HEMA tournament?
Well, working with Heartbreaker with the kids is I had to get them in outside of their normal kids class so they can come to the grown-ups or just the regular longsword classes and fight nights so they could practice. Because when in the kids class, let's first break it down and talk about what the age group, because we have a lot of teenagers that fight in adult tournaments or just regular tournaments.
Sure.
Absolutely no problem. They blend right in. When I look at youth, I'm looking at ages 8 to about 14.
Okay.
So the youngest kids that I train are 8. And once they get about 14, they start getting big enough and mature enough where they can work with adults with no problem. Um, on the opposite side of that, you also have adults who may not like working with kids. They might not want to train with kids for a various number of reasons, which, is fine. Some people, they might not feel comfortable training with someone who's 10, and there are physical limitations too. For one, kids are, you have grown-ups and you have little kids. So having the kids class is important, but it's a very different atmosphere. So I had to take the kids who wanted to participate in the tournament, and I had to have them train serious times. So they had to come to the regular class, our regular training, and I would get them geared up, which, oh my God, they hated wearing the gear. They hated wearing the gloves. They couldn't feel anything. You think grown-ups complain about the glove? Oh, the kids, and they just have lacrosse gloves on.
Yeah.
So, it was getting past the gear first, telling, convincing them you'll need it, which this usually means you have to hit them with the sword. Once they get hit with the sword a few times, they're much more open-minded about wearing the gear. And I don't mean like beat them with the sword, just like pop. And usually, that's enough to be like,
make sure they understand what it feels
like. Yeah, they have to know what it feels like to get hit.
I usually do it before and after. This is what it feels like with a tap here.
Yeah. And letting the boys know that they need to get cups. That's a big deal, because once they find out, they all, it's happened to all of them. They've all been hit down there, and they all realize they need a cup. Not on purpose, mind you. It's all just happened just in the course of fighting. So once they get used to the gear, it's getting them mainly to have intent in their cuts, because when we're in class, we're usually working at a very controlled speed, because the kids get there. We'll do a warm up to try to burn off some energy, but they're still really excited. So I have to make sure they stay at a controlled speed. Training them for tournaments, I kind of have to break that training a little bit to get them to kind of open up and use a little more force, a little more intent in their cuts. So getting them to get that full extension, that power, combined with footwork, that killing intent in their cut, takes quite a bit of practice once you kind of get them calmed down for class. So once you get that, it's pretty much, once you get past those two main things, it's pretty much just like training adults, is just make sure that what you're doing is how, you're training to respond, not react. You have a plan, but don't plan too far ahead. Make sure you're covering yourself with your cuts and your posta. And it's just drills and sparring, pretty much like adults, but it's kind of just getting the kids to know it's okay to hit, and that they learn control, because kids are always growing. Their bodies are different every year. Their distances change every year. So they're pretty much having to relearn every time they get out there, because they're going to grow like 2 inches, or their arms are going to suddenly be longer. So making sure the kids have control the whole time is really challenging, because they don't have control. Their bodies are constantly growing. So that's.
So one of the struggles I had, I taught karate / kickboxing for 8 years, and I ran from a 3-year-old program up to the adult program, and we several times had to have transition classes during the summer where you had a kid who's grown 2 or 3 inches, and it's emotionally hard for them to feel like they've stepped back in ability because they've gotten bigger, and there's a whole emotional scape to that where it's like, there's nothing that you've done that's wrong. You've just grown. So like your reach is different, your timing's different. Some of them even lose strength while they're growing because they're growing so rapidly. And so they're like, I used to be able to push this kid around. Now I can't push him around, and I'm bigger. And it's like, well, you're developing in different ways. So like that's even a struggle whenever you bring a kid from 1 and into an adult class.
Yeah.
That I've noticed. Yeah.
What did you, or if anything, did you change anything about the rule set? Like I know you kind of copied and pasted what you were doing for Texcalibur into Heartbreaker, but with it being a children's or a youth tournament, were there any changes you made?
I didn't make any changes, really. I pretty much just kept it the way it was. I think I changed the number of bouts, but that was the only thing for brevity. Because
was
we
that
had
for
a very.
brevity, or was that for the age range of the competitors?
I was fixing to say it was kind of for both.
Okay.
We had a limited amount of time. We ended up with a lot of kids, a little more than we had planned, but that was a good thing.
Okay.
But to kind of keep the kids, because I don't, it's bad enough when you're at a tournament and it's kind of hurry up and wait. It's even worse when you're a kid. So I wanted to try to keep the ball rolling. We did pretty good because we had 2 little tournament circles. So we were able to keep the kids engaged most of the time. But there were spots there where a few times where they got unengaged just because they had to wait a little bit. And they kind of ran, you remember that, they kind of ran around and we had to send them outside to kind of blow off a little bit of steam. So the hurry up and wait that we kind of experience sometimes in different tournaments, especially when we get into semifinals or finals, isn't really applicable for younger kids. Because it's hard because they're still excited. People are still fighting. So I think we ended up just having like a second during the finals. We just opened up that other one so the kids could slow spar.
Oh, we did. I'd forgotten.
Yeah,
But
yeah, we had opened it up so the kids could slow spar and stuff, just so they could still keep that energy up between bouts and things like that. So
y'all ran longsword. What other weapons do you think would be appropriate for kids if you were going to run it?
sword and shield.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, she has something to say. Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Yeah. So sword and shield is great for kids. One, it's a lot like boxing because and when I say sword and shield, I mean like a targe and a broadsword because that's what I study. So you have a small shield, small round shield over the arm, which is easy to get for kids because I mean you can either make one or you can buy martial arts shields like that.
For those at home, a targe is like Captain America's shield.
Yeah. I mean, I have a targe. Here's this.
Yeah.
Oh.
This is what I love about Skye. She's got everything.
This is just a homemade targe, and so this is what I mean by a targe. So you would have this in an offhand single sword, and it's really, for one, it's really fun, and it's something very identifiable for kids because you watch cartoons or you watch shows and they understand sword and shield. They understand that. But as soon as you tell them that you can hit someone with your shield, they just like and it blows their mind. So sword and shield, for one, the weapons to get for that are very diverse. They're easy to get and they're not expensive to get. It's easy to scale up for kids of different sizes. So you can have smaller shields, bigger shields, but it's easy to scale up. They don't need as much protective equipment. Basically, they've got a shield. That's most of their protective equipment right there. So they don't have to worry so much with trying to find a big heavy jacket or something to protect them as much with longsword. And it's different than longsword. So it gives them a completely kind of different skill set to bring to the table than just using, where in longsword is your sword is your shield. It is your both your offense and defense. And it moves kind of unilaterally, which if you look at the mechanics, you're basically just a bird wing, where this would be your radius and ulna. And then, the sword is an extension of that. That's how it moves. That's mechanics. Whereas with the sword and shield, it's almost like you're boxing because you're having to work both hands independently of each other, both to, defend. You have to keep one up, one down. You have to keep one is always going to be your guard. So it introduces a new way to fight with a different weapon system. Yeah. So it kind of expands and meets them. Then if they decide they want to learn dagger, it's kind of the same thing. If they want to learn single sword, they already know it. It's just not with the shield. So it's a good transition and a bridge between single, longsword and opening up a whole spectrum of other weapon systems.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. I'm really curious about this now. It's interesting to me that you start the kids with sword and shield and then move on to things like dagger or side sword and things like that. My curriculum did exactly the opposite when I was teaching middle school HEMA last year. As I said, hey, we're going to start with a dagger in your hand and we're going to teach you the basics of fighting that way, and then move on to, I felt like, more complicated things where we're using both hands with items in them instead of one as a warding hand. What brought about your philosophy on that? I'm curious.
Kids are super smart. I will tell you right now, my child students, they learn more quickly than my adults. I could teach them all the things in Italian and they will remember it when I see them a week later. I still have adults who don't know any Italian. So children are very bright. They are very quick and they remember what you teach them, and they will, they figure it out on their own. I've had 8 and 9-year-olds come up and explain to me how tapers work on a sword to displace the other weapon without me giving them any hints. They just came up to me at the end of class and go, "Hey, Miss Skye, if a sword does like that, I can turn it like this because this is a big triangle." And I'm like, yes.
Yeah, there we
yes.
go.
Murder mother is pleased. And
Oh my God.
And so kids are quick, and I'm teaching dagger is something I'm really hesitant on. Not just with kids. Kids, I would be more open to teaching dagger than adults. I think it's because a lot of people come in, and I teach Fior dagger, which is pretty much how to stab someone and grapple them at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm not going to give to someone with no experience, or I don't even have experience with that person, because it's too easy to really hurt someone during training if you don't have the right kind of experience working with that person and knowing what they're like. Because I mean, you could have any Yahoo walking off the street for a dagger seminar or your dagger class, and they could be somebody with a chip on their shoulder, or they got something to prove, or they just don't know their own strength. And it's too easy for them to dislocate somebody's elbow, or I got a rondelle right here. I mean, it's too easy. You could poke somebody in the eye or in the trachea, and I've had guys come in for regular sword class, and this is just beginner, and I'm sure you guys have worked with people like this too. They just don't have any control of their strength and speed. And if you take that, and it's hard enough with longsword, but tell them, okay, you're going to take this dagger, you're going to step in, they're going to come in and do that. It's a recipe for disaster. So dagger is one of those that I prefer to teach. And I'm not saying everybody should do this, because Fior teaches dagger first in his manual. But for myself, I would prefer just to start with longsword and kind of just from there.
Yeah, the longer range weapon, the easier it is to be saved, because just because I teach the dagger class and people know I've created dagger material, we start at the long range, just I think because of that, because I've seen like, okay, well, if we're here and we block, then we have to disarm, take the shoulder, bring them to the ground. Like, that's too many steps for a beginner, where it's just like the first drills we do is like placement. All right, you're going to spend the next 15 minutes learning how to place the dagger so you don't murder the other person. But yeah, I could totally see that whenever you got somebody who just brand new, well, typically when the brand new guy comes in, I'm the guy getting hurt because I'll pair up with them the whole time. So I'm the one getting janked in the jaw or something. So yeah, I find that a very interesting philosophy on that. I like it.
That's interesting. It's not where I came to, which is, I'm not sitting here trying to argue with you, but I'm fascinated to hear the differences in thought.
I don't train the kids in dagger, first off, because I'm sure they would become little murderers.
I kind of want that.
I do worry about that.
I'm positive if I trained those children to use dagger, they would already be, that's too much.
The good thing about homeschool, we would limit the violence down to just the home. So
I don't feel like that's a great argument.
I think it is. I mean, like, mom should be in the class. My mom taught me how to disarm a knife, so these kids should learn the same thing.
All right. I will tell you, it is incredibly difficult to convince the public school board that I can teach middle schoolers knife fighting. That is a.
You don't call it a knife. You call it a dagger or a small stick. Good way to get through that.
A baton.
Oh, baton, yeah.
Yes, because very sophisticated. I like it.
Because in Fiore, it's the badge of office.
Yeah, you sit there with your baton, and then when someone stabs you, you come up and then you roll their thing back and you stab them. So.
With their own dagger.
With their own dagger, yes. It is the way.
Yeah,
this is the way.
Technically, it was suicide, so.
Absolutely. I mean, you see his fingerprints were all over it.
So, do you have anything else you want to go over?
No, but I'm ready for this next point if you want me to jump into it.
Jump into it.
Yeah, no, this has been great. I could get lost in talking about how to teach kids. This is talking shop for me. I really love this.
Definitely, we will come back and do this again. I think a whole episode just over how to teach youth and
I think that would be really cool.
If I may, continuing on the youth, this is again not my curriculum. DeMoss in California, the school that I'm part of, they started teaching youth classes in 2016. And they've been doing it, and they've had youth tournaments at theirs. They've had they were more like exhibition tournaments for their kids. But the people running that are Timothy Anderson and Johnny Dietzel in California. They've been doing the youth classes there for 4 years consistently. And that's with homeschool and regular kids, and they've been very successful in it. And they're the people I spoke to before I started my kids' class. So for future reference, if you'd like to speak to anyone about working with kids, they've been doing it for 4 years.
Well, we'll definitely look them up.
That's really cool. Good shout out too. So now I want to talk about just kind of more broadly the tournament scene and how it relates to youth fighters, since you have so many of them that you've been training and all of that. So I want to get your thoughts on how you feel like the tournament scene interacts with youth fighters as it currently is. Have you taken kids to any tournaments outside of yours? Have you seen kids at tournaments? How do you?
Pandemic happened as far as mine, but when I was training with Davin Rich in California, I got to see the youth scene there, and the way they would do it is the kids loved it. When I say kids, these are talking about kids. They're all between 8 and 14 years old. Most of them were girls. I think there was one boy that ended up participating in the tournament. So, but they got out there. They had boffer swords that were made. This is before, we had the really good ones that you could get from Go Now, the foam swords from Go Now, which, but they just had homemade boffer swords that I helped with because I used to do amp guard and dagger here. So we devised them some kid-safe swords for their longsword tournament. And they got out there and they did the rules and they fought the tournament. But they got to watch and hang out with the adults, and they also got to hang out with the kids that didn't get to do the tournament. And so it's another community aspect for the kids to know that they can make friends with other kids and have safe sword play and do different types of weapons. And then they play. They bring a fantasy aspect to it, because I've seen my kids in the class do it when they're doing a drill, or I just let them do slow play. A lot of time I'll turn around and they'll be over there like doing dramatic deaths and I'm a knight. Or one kid I had knew Monty Python and the Holy Grail memorized, and he would start his little fights, because we'd end every class with a little King of the Hill game. And he would be, "Thou shalt not pass," and he'd do quotes from Monty Python every time. And so, it gives kids a chance to play and interact with one another doing this. It doesn't always have to be, serious times. I encourage my kids to play and make believe while they're doing this, as long as they do it safely, of course, because this helps in their learning. That's how people learn. They learn through play. So allowing the kids to play with one another and make games out of things, it helps them make friends and they have fun with it. Yeah. It's a good experience, and they learn honor. They learn to accept their hits. They learn that control, you don't have to hit as hard or as fast as you can, because a lot of them come in thinking they have to go fast because, of cartoons or whatever. And, they just learn that how they can control things through distance and time, and they have fun with it and they make friends. So it's much like grown-ups, I guess, in that respect.
And I think a lot of us came into this because of the fantasy element.
For sure.
I mean, we all grew up watching sword fights, Robin Hood, all that. And I think whenever we have become adults and we kind of start trying to be professional, we lose that fun element that the kids class really reminds you of. Like, yeah, I mean, I want to be Robin Hood. I want him to be the sheriff. I want to have fun.
Oh, I have to be the bad guy?
You always have to be the bad guy.
It's the mustache,
You're the slick guy. I'm the big brute.
All right, I accept.
Give me something in life, God.
I accept. So, with all of that in mind, let's assume, take as a granted for a moment, we'll talk about the opposite side of this in a minute, but let's assume for a moment that every club, school, and event in HEMA wants more youth practitioners. Let's say a club is coming to you with your experience and saying, hey, how do we at our club and at our event make this more welcoming for youth practitioners? What would your advice be?
If you're coming from the end of the parents, because the person you have to really convince are the parents, because they're the ones footing the bill, driving the kids, making sure the kids show up. I think first you have to fulfill their expectations. What are they getting out of it? What are their kids getting out of it? Because the kids just want to play. That's what the kids want. They see swords and they want to play. But for one, if you're looking at particularly the homeschool crowd, because that's where a lot of students come from, for one, it gets the kids out doing activities. They get their PE credits, all that good stuff. They get to work with their peers and make friends. So the kids get a lot out of it. If it's just regular kids from school, how does this make the kids' life better? Because that's what parents are worried about. So for one, your kid gets one thing, your kid's happy because they get to play with swords. A lot of the times the parents are interested in swords too. Tell them what the kids are going to learn besides just fighting with a sword. History, art. They get to learn body mechanics. They get to learn physics. They get to learn sportsmanship. They learn how to deal and read with people. They get to make friends. They're part of a community. They get to participate in tournaments to test their skill, because a lot of people just want a shiny at the end of the day, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
So I think selling it to the parents is the first big step, because the kids want to play with swords. You don't really have to sell it to the kids.
Mm-hmm.
But once you sell it to the parents, you have to keep the kids engaged.
Yeah.
And to do that, you have to make sure the kids are having fun and they have goals that they can reach, and then they can have something they can show for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want HEMA to turn into little McDojos. Nobody wants the McDojo thing where, we're just worrying and catering to kids.
Mm-hmm.
I let the kids know, I'm teaching you to murder people. None of this is nice. When I train them to do a cut, I make sure they understand that this sword strike is designed to go through this man's skull.
Mm-hmm.
I'll point on Bob. This is what we're training you to do. We are training you to use the sword to inflict bodily harm and kill people. I'll give them historical reference, not too deep, because again, most kids, they're not too worried. Unless you got the one that's like, actually, the 100 Years' War lasted 116 years, So that was my niece. My niece did that. And so you have to make sure that you keep it engaging for the kids, for them to stick with it. Grown-ups, they're like, I got a sword, and grown-ups are pretty good at finding their own motivation most of the time. But kids have a lot going on. They've got school, they've got different projects at school. A lot of parents try to put their kids as many things as possible. Most of them, like some of my students, were taking like karate after they finished my sword class. So they've got a lot of irons in the fire all the time. They're going on vacations with parents. So the kids have a lot on their plate competing for their attention. So you kind of have to make sure that you stay engaging for the kids in your class and keep them wanting to come to class and keep it fun.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very cool. Do you think, from a competitive aspect, if a school wants to be more attractive with their tournament to youth, is the right answer to have a youth tournament like what you did, or is it to tweak something about the open tournament and include youth fighters?
I think standalone youth tournaments on a little, this comes again with keeping the kids engaged. And that's really what Heartbreaker was. I didn't intend it to be a really big groundbreaking thing. I intended it to keep the children engaged because they wanted to fight. They wanted to take these skills that they learned and apply them, which of course we all will do. So having little local youth tournaments, maybe quarterly, is something good to keep the kids engaged. And if you can get another school to come in and just have a little regional tournament, it doesn't have to have a big trophy or anything. We just printed out little certificates and the kids were happy with those. They just something to keep the kids engaged regularly for the youth tournaments. Now, as far as larger tournaments go, I would love to see a youth tournament just for kids like under 14 years old, because you can't expect a 10-year-old to go out there and fight in a Laring tournament, right, against somebody who's 50.
You can't expect them to do well. Yeah. You can set them out.
The children to die. Yeah.
Actually, I would be. It's kind of unfair for the adults who have to face them too, and that kind of comes into people who may not feel comfortable fighting kids because they don't want to hurt them. So if you were, a big guy, you're 6'4", say you're Jake, and your opponent ends up being a 12-year-old, girl, for instance, or just 12-year-old boy, and you don't want to be a jerk and hit them from 8 feet away. Yeah. Because that's kind of and the kid's going to get out there, but you don't, so where it kind of loses a balance. There's no more balance there. It's very overwhelmingly one-sided. And also it's just not right. So having a youth tournament for youth, again, between 8 and 12 or 8 and 13 years old, to have their own where they can fight their peers is important, because they get to test themselves against their peers. Yeah. They're not being tested against everyone else. So having a separate youth tournament just for them where they can fight their peers, hang out with their peers, play with their peers, do some classes with them, that's them, that's their thing. But they are free to come and go and watch and participate if they so choose with the stuff the grown-ups are doing or the teenagers. So they kind of get to experience both worlds that way, but still have their kind of safe group of peers that they can do stuff with.
Do you think Do you think we should be trying to integrate as much as possible, or do you think we should be reserving some spaces that are kind of kid-free? Like I'm thinking of, let's assume we've got, we'll use the very specific example, right? So I'm thinking of a student I brought down who actually took first in your tournament, which I'm really proud of him for. And he's not a big dude.
He's very fast and had very good
very
measure.
skilled, and I would love to brag on him.
That guy.
Yeah. You know, I'm not gonna say his name on an internet podcast because school rules and things like that. But yeah, I was really, really proud of him. He did incredibly well in the youth tournament. And my recommendation to him absolutely would have been, yeah, go fight in an open tournament. Like you're not going to do as well, but do it. You have the skills, you have the speed, you have the training. You should absolutely be winning half your pool matches in any tournament I've been in.
Yeah.
Do you think that is a valuable way to kind of push competitive HEMA if we've got these students who are training that way? Or do you think that does a disservice to, like you're describing, these adults who don't want to fight a kid who's 5 foot nothing? And yeah, that's a weird spot. How would you handle that?
I would handle that on a case-to-case basis, because you do have some kids. Like I had some kids I tried to get to compete in the Heartbreaker, and they were a little intimidated just to fight other kids.
Yeah.
But you could have kids like the boy who made first at Heartbreaker, who has done a few youth tournaments, say, and his coach, feels he's good enough, he can compete. So he kind of has his coach's blessing at that point. If he wants to, you can go compete in this.
Well, sure, but I'm thinking more about the adult competitors, the traditional HEMA competitors at Gesselfechten or Bro, or I'm going to use the shuffle tournaments that I'm familiar with as my examples here. When you're putting a 13-year-old, a 12-year-old, 13-year-old who is a small human in the ring against them, are we doing a disservice to those open tournaments?
I don't think so if the person knows, okay, so we've already experienced that at Gesselfechten.
True.
Because my first time at Gesselfechten, I lost to Caitlin, who was 13.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, she was 13 and still winning. Oh my God. She's
but that's the thing. I went in there knowing that she knew what she was doing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't underestimate her. I knew what she was doing. I'd spoken to her before. She was experienced.
Mm-hmm.
If I went in there and there was a 10-year-old who was little, but their coach said they could fight, I've fought some little grown-up people. I've fought guys slighter and smaller than me. And that's not uncommon in our regular open tournaments, where you'll have somebody who's 6'6" and some little slight guy who's 5 foot nothing, or woman. And, they each bring something to the table. So, but it's experience that they're bringing. So we already kind of have that physical discrepancy happening in open tournaments already.
Right.
Now, if it was like some kid's first tournament and he just wandered in because there's no youth tournament, so they just stuck the kids in open, that's a little different.
Okay.
So I think having the option there for kids who want to fight kids can stay in a youth tournament, whereas ones who feel like, yeah, youth tournament's too easy for me, I should be doing this, they can go do that. And I think that's already happening at Gesselfechten and Bro and other tournaments where you do have teenagers competing and doing very, very well. Or in Jeremy's son's case, just acing everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, we're not going to go into that.
Are you still remembering your last beatdown?
I still remember the last time I lost to him. I had to go calm myself down. I was like, that fast. He read me like a book.
He was like 17 too.
Oh yeah, don't remind me.
As those kids, they learn. Those kids, they're dangerous.
Yeah. Well, and so just to clarify, you feel like it's much more about experience of the youth fighter than it is about their age.
I do. I think it's about skill. So, but the youth tournaments are an introduction. It's a safe kind of like kiddie pool for those kids. So it's like, I've been training and I want to go fight. Well, the only tournament's going to be open, so good luck. And that's intimidating.
Okay, so often,
and also some of their parents may not want them to do that.
Oh,
yeah,
that's true.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah. Do you think it's better? Well, I guess maybe you may have just answered my question, but could we replace the idea of a youth tournament with a Newling tournament and achieve the same goals in most cases?
So I kind of had that with Texcalibur, where I had the red and blue tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
So the blue tournament was a lower intensity than the red, and it wasn't necessarily for new people. I wanted the blue tournament to be for people who weren't, I guess you could say, for people who just can't compete with some of the people who constantly win, because there are a lot of people who, for whatever reason, they're just never going to be able to go very far in a regular longsword tournament. And I'm not one of those people that consider tournaments as a real test of anyone's sword fighting skill in real life. I can think of tournaments as they're a challenge. They're a fun challenge. You're out there to get points and hang out with friends and have fun. And I know there's a lot of people who would disagree with me on that.
Sure.
So, but I want tournaments to be fun, and I want them to be challenging. At the same time, I don't want them to be so challenging that they're hopeless for some people.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have a blue tournament that was lower intensity, so you could get people who might have injuries or limited mobility or whatever reason. They can compete in the blue tournament, which is lower intensity, and get a little more fights and a little more enjoyment and a little more satisfaction out of it than they would just going into a regular open, where you could get bad luck and everyone in your pool is all a 28-year-old guy in great shape and has speed and power and everything on top of you. And you're just like, well, I guess I'll do the best I can. And then that's your one pool and you're done.
Yeah.
So it can get discouraging because, I'm not the best fighter. I go and fight and I have fun, but there's people who I've seen go to every tournament. They are at every tournament and they do the best they can. And, I'd like to have something that is more, I guess,
encouraging
for people. Yeah. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Would you recommend longsword being the first event that youth would have at a tournament, or would you think a sword and shield one would be a better event for kids to start in?
I'm open on either of those. I think I would ask the kids, honestly. Get some information from everybody, see which one had the most interest, just like we do with regular tournaments. We'll do a survey. What events do you want to see at this, or what fights do you want to see at this event? What kind of weapon systems do you want at this event? And do the same thing with the kids. What system do they have the most fun at? Which system are they best at? So, and just go from there.
Yeah. So. Sounds awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So, anything else? We kind of went all over the map. We've got our nice little fancy lists here.
Yeah, I have my fancy list too. It's kind of
And you hit all of question 4 when we were up talking about question 2, I think. So that's really cool. But yeah, so just before we move on past like the tournament scene and how it interacts with youth fighters, is there anything you feel like we missed or anything you were hoping to say or talk about?
I would like the tournament scenes to encourage kids. It's more encouragement for kids to stick with HEMA, because besides the tournament and the fighting and the winning, there's the community and the class aspect. Because as a teacher, as an instructor, particularly here where I'm very isolated, there's only certain things that I teach. And I want the kids to be able to meet people from different schools. Just like I want all of my students, I encourage all of my students, whether they're youth or grown up, to travel and meet people from different schools and see how they do things. Because as you well know, every school in HEMA has a different interpretation. They teach everything just slightly different. Yeah. They all have a different way. And just because the way I teach something, that doesn't make it the best way or the only way. And I want people to get as many tools in their tool belt as they can. And it's the same with the kids. I want them to be able to go out there and see that there's a whole world of other people who do sword fighting and weapon fighting, and some of them that do it for a living and travel all around the world and get to go on TV shows and all kinds of cool stuff, and that it's something with goals. It's not just like I took Taekwondo when I was 13 and there's nowhere to go from there.
Yeah.
I want them to see that this is something that they can branch out and do something with into their adulthood.
Right. I mean, your background is the perfect example of what makes me love HEMA more than any other martial art is look at all the diversity of weapons you have on the back, the weapons, the armor, the manuals. There's so much material that a person who gets started in HEMA literally has just a labyrinth of things to learn. And as a person who is now apparently middle-aged, as you get older, you want to learn more and more stuff so that the art stays fun, it stays diverse, it stays challenging. And it's not just like the reason I don't do like strictly Muay Thai kickboxing anymore is after a while you're doing the exact same thing, and then it's just who's stronger, faster, harder, who's got a chip on their shoulder. And where HEMA, it's just like you have, okay, you're primarily Italian style, we're primarily German, and then like cross training in that. Oh, this was wonderful to learn outside of armor. Let's try doing it inside armor. Let's try adding a shield to the equation. Let's mix and match the weapon systems. And so then it just, the plethora of options becomes so great that one, it's daunting, and the other time it's so much fun to think about.
Well, yeah, because you can give kids a wide array of possible goals, from the competitive stuff to the nerdier stuff and all of that kind of stuff. That's a good point. That's a really good point. Yeah. So with that goal in mind of trying to set this goal out in front of our youth practitioners and trying to get to a point where they can interact with new things and meet new people and see for themselves kind of the future of practicing this art, what's the one thing that you wish, if you had that magic wand and you could make all of the schools do what you want them to do for your youth fighters to be able to, for you to reach that goal, what would it be?
A magical goal. Oh gosh. Having regular tournament meetups. I that's kind of skewed because I'm so isolated, and I've been so isolated for the last 6 months. And I'm, but I guess
now, yeah.
But I guess a kind of, a cohesion of the youth community, so that the kids will be able to travel and they'll be able to see and meet new people. Because to me, that's part of learning as a child, is getting out of your element and getting out of your little 4 walls and experiencing the world. I mean, who would love to take a HEMA field trip somewhere, like to the Getty Museum or to, a neighboring school and spend a weekend at a boot camp in Austin or Oklahoma City, a youth boot camp for HEMA? That would be just so much fun for the kids and the instructors who go with them.
Yeah.
So, things like that to help build and strengthen our community and our art, because it's all about sharing ideas and finding out what works and what doesn't, and going over manuscripts and learning how to read them and decipher them. It's like, what does this mean? Look at how his foot's turned out. What do you think that is? And then everybody trying to mimic the manuscript and be like, no, that doesn't work. You imagine watching a bunch of little kids trying to do that? That would get so goofy. So having things like that for the kids to participate in and learn and grow would just be great. I'd be in heaven.
That your answer got me excited about the That's fantastic, Skye.
I'm taking notes.
I love that
idea. I'm stealing that idea.
But if we do that, we're going to Oklahoma. I don't wish Midland on anybody, particularly in the summer.
Well, I want to take a quick minute and say I did take 6 middle schoolers to Midland, Texas for a tournament.
Yes,
that was an experience I had. We loaded up in 2 cars and 2 parents, myself and my partner, and we chaperoned the trip. And we left at, I think it was 3 o'clock in the morning from Oklahoma City on a Saturday. We got down there, we fought for 4 hours, loaded the kids back in the car, got some Cane's chicken, and drove back. And it was a mess. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't a mess. It was a logistical nightmare. It was stressful. It was I thought I knew what it was like to be annoyed by middle school music, but I had no idea. And I'm smiling while I say this, because what a fantastic experience that was. What a cool thing.
They have a word for that. It's called an adventure.
Yeah, it was. It was an adventure. And I had a bunch of middle school students who got to live out in, like you've been saying, a fantasy adventure. They got to go to a tournament, fight with swords, and hear strangers cheering them on. And that was good on you. You put on a cool tournament, and I was really grateful to take my team down there. That was really, really fun. So that was cool. That was really cool. I think that's a cool thing.
Yes. All right. So is there anything that you would like to plug, that you want to promote, that you're working on, or anything that you're looking forward to in the future?
Right now, I'm just looking forward to starting my sword classes back up in October, pending further catastrophes.
Yeah.
I do want to, I'm still doing Texcalibur in the Celtic Fair, pending further catastrophes. That's going to be in mid-March. So it'll be mid-March 2021. I'll start advertising for it again probably in November. and open ticket sales up again. I'll have the new prices and everything squared away, hopefully with the people running the Celtic Fair by then. As far as projects here, I had a lot planned this year, but things have changed. So I'm actually looking at hopefully having my own brick and mortar place sometime next year. Because that would allow me, because in daytime, what pays my bills is I'm a personal trainer and nutrition coach. So having a place where I can do my personal training and coaching and then also do all of my sword stuff would be really beneficial, because as you see, I have a bunch of equipment. I've made it tidy, but the rest of the room is an explosion of spears and synthetic swords and power tools. So hoping to have my own brick and mortar place next year for all this would be beneficial. Also, as far as personal goals for me, I really want to start traveling again, because one of my big things is learning, which is a lot of the time I turn down people ask me if I want to teach classes at events, and I turn them down because I'm lazy and I want to take classes. So I want to start going to schools again on the weekends, like Zimbrogi and other places, so I can learn, because I can't be a vacuum. If I'm going to be an instructor and a good instructor, I have to keep learning, keep it fresh, find out what new things have come out, like, oh, we don't hold the sword like this, we hold it like that, So small sword is my new stupid thing I'm pursuing. So
I understand. I've been bit by the bug too.
But yeah, just kind of getting back on the horse. Unfortunately, I don't have any big new projects or plugs other than just kind of getting back on the horse after the pandemic and the quarantine and everything. So.
Well, but it's cool that you, I say we as if I'm included, that you're planning Texcalibur for next year already.
You could be included. You could be included.
Well, I'm very excited. I plan on being there.
So you remember we were talking about Heartbreaker was so much fun, and you were asking me if we could get a youth tournament going for Texcalibur, and I'm like, it's too late notice. Well, this year, 2021, I will have a youth tournament for Texcalibur.
That'll be excellent.
Because I'm just starting everything over. So I'm just taking all the feedback I got from everybody leading up to 2020's one. So we'll probably have a youth tournament, a blue tournament, a red tournament, the mixed weapons. I'm not sure about the challenge now, because we're going to be at a community fair. So there may be too much stabby going on, but I'll come up with some kind of 24-hour challenge that we could do. It may be along the Assassin's game idea, but I might tweak it a little. So we'll see. And again, I'll of course invite people out to teach classes. We're supposed to have conference rooms to do classes in while we're there. So that'll be fun.
We could throw people.
That'd be fun.
Well, I cannot wait to win the youth tournament next year. So
do we need to go back to the middle-aged joke?
I can like walk on my knees. It'll be fine.
Yeah, that'll be fine. Fine is definitely the word I would use for that. Well, I would encourage everybody watching to absolutely look up Texcalibur. Please be there next year. Make that a priority. And if you have youth students, or if you are a youth student or want to be a youth student, please get in touch with whoever you're training with, or us at Zimbrogi or Skye down at Davin, because we would love to help you get connected with how you can come and compete, even if you're 10. Let's have some fun with this. Let's learn to fight swords. Let's be Robin Hood. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, and if you happen to be out in the Midland area, look Skye up. She's an amazing teacher. She's an amazing competitor, and we're so glad that we had you today.
Thank you very much. I had a really good time.
Yeah, thanks for being here. This was absolutely awesome.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and that's been Fighting Words.
We did it!